Hello, everybody, and welcome into the MVP show here on Sunday, October 11th, 2020. Boys, it's been a week, I would say, but I'm glad that you hopped on the Zoom call and we're willing to count down this hour until we start NFL action here in NFL Week 5.
A lot of news this week, obviously, especially in the last day. So,
Yeah,
a lot to talk about for sure.
absolutely. And we'll start, and I think it's the only place to start. Again, there's so much happening during this specific time period, but I think the only place to start is what happened this week, and that's the New York Yankees playing in the American League Divisional Series against the Tampa Bay Rays and losing in 5 games. And, on paper, you look at this matchup, the one-seeded Rays versus the five-seeded Yankees. On paper, maybe that's how it was supposed to go. But I think most MLB fans and most Yankee fans definitely went into the series, thinking that they were the favorites. Vegas indicated they were the favorites, and that they had enough to beat the Tampa Bay Rays. I still feel that way. I still feel they had enough to beat the Tampa Bay Rays. The problem is they didn't. And we talked about it on our podcast, which airs on VIC from 11:30 and is logged on Anchor as well as Spotify. But we talked about it, Brennan, and I want to just get back into it because it wasn't so much the Yankees underperforming. That was a part of it. But it was boneheaded moves in specific moments of the series. In game 2, instead of pitching Tanaka for 6 innings, 5 innings, however, making him the starter, Jordan Montgomery, Devi Garcia, even just starting J Happ. The Yankees in game 2 decide to put Devi Garcia out there for an inning as an opener, the thing that the Tampa Bay Rays invented, and then pitch J Happ for the next couple innings, and it blows up in their face. They were up 1-0 in the series, completely lost momentum, trying to play little games and tinker with what's working, and that's just pitching the best that you have, which you should do in a postseason series. So they do that, and then, okay, go down 2-1 the series, a good game 4 in which Jordan Montgomery really earned his keep, and I think impressed a lot of people, especially I think most Yankee fans who maybe over the years thought he was underrated, but he finally showed. Okay, great. You go to game 5. Everything's on the wall. Everyone's available, this and that. Tampa Bay had to use 5 pitchers. The Yankees had to use 3, and were still the team that looked like they were going to give up the lead first and then did in the 8th inning. And it was a great outing from Cole. Again, I wish he can go 6, 7. I mean, obviously the ideal thing would have been a complete game, but in this 2020 world, not the most realistic thing. But in a season or in a series where he's on short rest, he comes out, he only allows 1 hit, that 1 hit being a home run. He gives you 5 innings and 1 run. But there was no trust in this bullpen and no outside the box ideas. You had them in game 2, but you didn't have them in game 5. So you go with Britton. He doesn't get you to the 7th, so you have to go or to the 8th, I should say. And Chapman has to try and get 7 outs, which Brennan, we know in his history, isn't the greatest thing to do. And he pitched the previous night as well. So you're putting Aroldis Chapman in a situation in which he has to get 7 outs. That's 2 innings and then an out in an additional inning. He's a closer. And of course, I mean, you could call it poetic or whatever you want to say, but Brousseau hits a home run off Aroldis Chapman, and the Tampa Bay Rays defeat the New York Yankees 2-1. And it's now been 3,171 days since New York has won a championship, and that will continue, I think, at least until next baseball season.
I mean, I'm just so frustrated with this team because we come out in the beginning of the year. The Yankees are odds-on favorites to win the World Series, along with the Los Angeles Dodgers. They underperform in the regular season. They go on that losing streak of 2 weeks where they looked like one of the worst teams in baseball. They dropped out of ESPN and Bleacher Report's top 10 in the power rankings. And then they kind of get their mojo back at the end of the year where they start winning games. And you think maybe, this team can go on a run in the playoffs. We talked about it a few weeks ago where once you get into the playoffs, the regular season doesn't really matter anymore because anything can happen. And then they come out and they perform like that team we saw lose 14 games in a row. I think when you look back at this series, we mentioned it in the podcast. So if you're coming over, you're going to hear a lot of the same stuff. But this is going to be a series that's remembered for Aaron Boone's managerial mistakes. I mean, you look at game number 2, a game where they lost. You go up 1-0 in the series. That is a huge momentum boost. All you have to do is win one more game. You have to get lucky in one game over the next 2, and you're 1 game away. They come out in game 2. They announced Deivi Garcia is going to be the starter. And honestly, Yankees fans, I don't think minded that. You look at what happened in that game, and when you hear that Deivi Garcia, who performed very well in his last few starts of the season, even though he's a rookie, when you hear that he's going to be starting game 2, you think to yourself, you know what? I have a little bit of confidence in him. And I think that he can go out, whether he throws 5 innings, whether he throws 4 innings. But if he goes out and only allows, 1 or 2 runs, the Yankees offense should be able to back him up. But then you send him out there for 1 inning. He gives up 1 run on a home run. So, could be a fluke swing. Other than that, didn't really let anything else go or anyone else on base. And then you put in J.A. Happ after him. That doesn't make any sense to me. I get that you're trying to play small ball, but when you're an organization that goes out and pays millions and millions of dollars to these athletes to go out and try and win you games like that, small ball is not the game that you're playing. Small ball is for teams like we saw it before, the Oakland A's, who spend in small ball when they went on to win, 24, 25 games in a row with less than $100 million on the roster. We saw it with the Tampa Bay Rays this year, who I believe on their roster only have $80 million, and they go out and they play small ball, and they win against these big teams because that's how their organization is built and how their team is built. The New York Yankees are not built that way. So to try and out small ball a team like that when your team is built upon guys who hit the ball 500 feet doesn't make any sense to me. We saw it in game 2, and we see it in game 5. Aaron Boone subs out Gary Sanchez, who I agree, Gary Sanchez should not have gotten a lot of starts in this regular season, especially with how Kyle Higashioka started playing at the end of the year. And I completely agree with Higa starting 4 of the 5 games in this ALDS. But then you take Higa out, who the game prior was 2 for 4 with an insurance run batted in late in the game, had an RBI. You take him out for Mike Ford, who I love Mike Ford, and it made sense matchup-wise, righty versus lefty. But Ford hasn't gotten a hit in the last month. He literally did not have a hit since August. It doesn't make any sense to me why you're putting him in the game in this high-pressure spot in the 8th inning when you have a guy. You're trading Kyle Higashioka, who had a hot bat, for Mike Ford, who hadn't had a hit in a month. Getting rid of Higashioka's defense, who over the last 2 games, games 4 and 5, he kept the Yankees in the game with his defense behind the plate. You're putting Sanchez back there to catch the final 2 innings of Aroldis Chapman, who throws 100 and whatever miles per hour. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would trade defense and a hot bat for someone who hasn't gotten a hit in a month and for someone who historically is one of the worst defenders behind the plate in the league. Makes 0 sense to me, and I think when you look back at the series, you look at those mistakes as why the Yankees lost.
You mentioned the small ball in terms of just how the roster is built by Tampa, and it's not so much, they're bunting or stealing bases or this and that, but Tampa doesn't have the biggest, payroll. I think the stat was that Garrett Cole had made $12 million, I think, per year. That might be wrong, but that's the stat I saw where he made 12 this year, and the entire Rays lineup combined made $8 million. So that's how both teams are made, and that's what annoyed me just about Game 2. Circling back to that, pitch with what you got. Tampa has to be creative and use openers and use bullpen and go overly analytical and try to find a diamond in the rough players in the minor league system. The Yankees do that as well, and I think to a certain extent one of the best in baseball in terms of finding people, but they still build or finish off their rosters by throwing money at people like they did with Garrett Cole. So that's how you have to win. Use the arms that you pay all this money for. Use the bats that have been on the team for a couple of years and are your team, and use them. And you mentioned the matchup Mike Ford. Absolutely. Any analytics person would tell you the matchup, you want a lefty versus a righty. But Mike Ford? I mean, you mentioned it, Brendan. I didn't even think about it over this after the game, but Mike Tauchman would have been a better option than Mike Ford. I mean, so, and you had Clint Frazier on the bench, and I know, all right, Clint's a righty versus is a righty in Castillo, but Mike Ford? Are we serious now? To defensively downgrade too? Yeah.
No, and another guy you had on the bench in that Game 5 was Clint Frazier, who was one of the hottest bats in baseball at this point. Even though it's a righty on righty, the dude has been mashing all playoffs. So I don't understand why you go with Mike Ford, who, as I mentioned, not a hit in a month.
It's crazy. It's crazy. No,
and you mentioned the pitchers. You mentioned the pitchers earlier. I didn't really touch on that, but to rely on Zach Britton and Aroldis Chapman to get you through 4 innings, doesn't make any sense either. You have Davy Garcia. He threw 1 inning in that entire series. He can be used as a long reliever because he's a starter. You can put him in there in a high-pressure situation. Maybe even if you get an inning out of him, that makes it so that Chapman doesn't have to throw in 3 different innings and try and get 7 outs. I get it that Britton was hot. Leave him in for an inning, maybe 2. We got 1 2/3 out of him, and then took him out to finish the seventh inning, or to let Chapman finish the 7th inning. It doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't go with a long reliever first, and then try and get Britton and Chapman as you normally would in any other game in the 8th and 9th to close it out.
Yeah, and you could look at the injury of Tommy Kahnle of being something that hurt the Yankees in this series, but where was Adam Ottavino? I mean, they don't trust Adam Ottavino enough to get 3 outs in any situation. Oh my goodness! I mean, it's just crazy. And Brennan, you're right. Like that was my whole thought process. The takeaway. We touched on Ford and the offense and all the games prior, and the defensive substitution and downgrade of putting Higashioka over Sanchez. But just the fact that the Rays used 5 pitchers and the Yankees used 3, and I felt like the Rays had more left. Like, that's just not where you want to be. How is that possible? They had Morton and Snell in the bullpen, so if Chapman did get out of that situation going forward in extra innings, I'm like, the Rays got this. The Yanks had a strike earlier to get at least 2 runs, and they just couldn't do it off the Rays bullpen, and they're going home, and the ALCS starts tonight. It's between the 1 seed Tampa Bay Rays and the 6 seed Houston Astros. So baseball fans are just so ecstatic that the Houston Astros are there. For the for the 3rd year in 4 seasons, or however you want to phrase it. And 2019 last year was Yanks Astros in the ALCS. 2017 it was Yanks Astros. They don't even get to play the Astros this year. Couldn't even make it to the championship series in a 60-game season. So definitely a disappointment around the board. And that ALCS game, first pitch is at 7:37 on Sunday. But it's going to have a little competition tonight because the NBA Finals Game 6 tips off tonight at 7:30. And Dan, this is where we bring you into the conversation. So hopefully you got your your breath during that 11-minute rant between me and Brennan and I. But these NBA Finals, I think if you ask most people, they thought that this series would be over by now. There wouldn't be a Game 6. Maybe there wouldn't have even been a Game 5, just looking at the matchup on paper. But the Miami Heat have not gone away without a fight. They have played hard. And, I mean, I think what was the one game they won, not Game 5? I want to say, what was it, Game 3? In terms of Game 3, in which they played well. But the last game, Game 5, was definitely the best of this NBA Finals. But my takeaway was just, I wish Danny Green was Steve Kerr, John Paxton.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people feel that way as well. I mean, there's been so much talk about Danny Green missing a wide open 3. People, shooting a 3-point shot in the NBA is probably one of the most difficult things you could ever imagine doing. It's like hitting a baseball. It's like playing in the NFL. If anyone thinks that they could have made that shot in that situation like a normal, person who's not a professional athlete, you're wrong. It's not going to happen. Those are the strongest, biggest, fastest athletes in the world. And the fact that he missed a 3, you should forgive him because that's how shooting works. You don't make every single shot, even though he's getting death threats online because he missed a wide open shot, which, by the way, LeBron made the right play. He was wide open. And you see Damian Lillard saying, I would have shot over, all 3 of them. Well, that's why you're at home, Dame, okay? LeBron didn't. He would have passed. So, I think that whole thing is unbelievable. You can expect Danny Green. Maybe he's not having the best series, but he'll come back and he'll maybe hit the far side of the rim next time. That one was a little short. But, again, get off of Danny Green. It's not his fault the Lakers lost Game 5, okay? I just want to make that clear.
Well, I just feel bad for you can't really feel bad for LeBron, but he did make the right basketball play in that scenario. He was triple or near quadruple teams driving on the right side, and then gave it to Danny Green at the top of the key with a lot of space, and he just couldn't sink it. And Dan, we touched on this, but once it went to Markieff Morris's hands, I was like, game's over. Uh, that guy, maybe this isn't the best NBA analysis for me, but Markieff Morris played like 26 minutes, had 0 points, a rebound, 3 turnovers, and nothing else. That's what you do in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Why are you out there? Oh my goodness. But that's besides the point. But something I want to also circle back on. I know we touched about this on the podcast, Dan, but the legacy of LeBron is what these finals are all about, in my opinion. You know, it's why the people that are watching, which has been a record low in this finals, but the people that are watching, that's why they're invested, to see if LeBron could add a 4th title to his belt. The fact that he didn't sweep Miami, he didn't beat him in 5, maybe could beat him in 6 tonight. Does that hurt his legacy at all? And I know what your probably argument is going to be, where no matter what in this modern age, it's just anti-LeBron. But do you think in actuality that it hurts his legacy that he couldn't finish off Miami, who you could argue is the easiest NBA Finals opponent he had, quicker?
Maybe. I mean, you could make a case for that it wasn't great that he couldn't finish off Miami quicker. I think that if he does win the series at the end of the day, that's what should matter and what people should think back on. But yeah, I mean, people are always going to find ways to, talk about Jordan over LeBron. I've already talked about how insane I think this whole thing is, but it's true though. I think that people will look at it saying, oh well, he went to 6 games. Maybe LeBron's not as good as he was. He had 40 last game, by the way. But no one wants to talk about that when it comes to LeBron. So I just thought to myself, self, what would you do when you want to know the answer to something that you're not sure? I mean, it's subjective. So I thought to myself on my desk right here, I have one of these magic 8 balls where you just like shake it and it gives you an answer. So before you guys were talking about the Yankees, I was shaking it and it was telling me stuff. So will this hurt LeBron's legacy? Let's see here.
To be determined.
There's a lot of bubbles in the way right now. It says no doubt about it. I don't know if you can read that. It doesn't say no doubt about it. So if LeBron doesn't, this is going to hurt his legacy, guys. So write it down. The Magic 8 Ball set.
That's what I love about Dan. Just taking something people put hours of research into it and saying you're dumb. Here's a Magic 8 Ball. Oh,
I didn't think I was talking about the Yankees too. I was like, should Aaron Boone be fired? And I shook it, and it said the Stars say no.
Wow.
So I guess, the Stars didn't say so. So
yeah. Well, it's the analytic department. Ask the 8 Ball next time if the analytic department should be fired. But one last thing regarding the finals, Dan. Who do you got tonight? I think I know who you got, but could Miami extend this to a Game 7?
Miami can extend this to a Game 7. I don't think that they will. I think LeBron will take care of business tonight. He's already dropped 2 of them. So I'm going to take the Lakers. But if the Heat win again and they've already surprised us twice, I wouldn't be really that shocked. But again, tonight, taking LA.
All right, so there you go. Dan has Lakers in 6. And again, that game 7:30 tonight on ESPN, and the ALCS that I mentioned earlier, that's 7:37 on TBS, and that's between the Astros and the Rays. So a jammed Sunday night that you have as a viewer, and hopefully I think we broke that down. And I think going forward we'll probably break down baseball's remaining postseason, obviously not as passionately due to no New York teams being there, but we'll cover it as well. But the NBA season can end tonight if LeBron gets it done. Now shifting over to hockey, and there wasn't much news in terms of, obviously, the season's over, Stanley Cup, but free agency was opened on Friday, and there were a couple of New York Rangers who went away, and we talked about it last week, the buyout of Henrik Lundqvist, and you could check on our YouTube page our thoughts. We, made a 5-minute compressed video of what our thoughts were on, just Henrik Lundqvist's legacy, and then, you could go back and watch that. But Henrik Lundqvist decided to sign with the Washington Capitals, a 1-year deal with a team in the Eastern Conference. The Capitals also then got rid of Braden Holtby, and I believe Holtby's a Vancouver Canuck now. So Lundqvist is going to compete with the starting job with the younger goalie that the Capitals have. But for the first time in his career, Henrik Lundqvist is no longer a New York Ranger. And Brennan, I know, there's pockets of Ranger fans that are like, you know what? I hope he does well. I hope, he goes to the playoffs. Obviously, if the Rangers can't make it, I hope he wins a cup. There's some pockets like that. And there's other people who are just like, I can't believe that he went to a team in the Eastern Conference, or he has the right to do so. But to go to a team that the Rangers are rivals with, they're not traditional rivals. It's not Rangers Philly or Rangers Islanders. But because over the last decade, the amount of playoff series that the Rangers and Capitals have had, they're considered rivals, I think, by both fan bases. So to go there, for me, it was a very disappointing start to my Friday.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at free agency and how a lot of the NHL is one of the most respectful leagues in regards to veterans trying to go to teams to win a cup. I mean, take a look a few years ago with Jerome McGinley, who I believe went to the Flames. No, he played for the Flames. And then, I forget which team he went to, but he went to a cup contender. Mm-hmm. And everyone was kind of like, you know what, let's try and get this guy a cup. And I think that the NHL, more than any other league, respects that and tries to get these veterans the championship, because that's really what, more than any other league, what these players play for. So I understand why he tries to go to a contender where the Rangers maybe, they might go on a run next year and be contenders. Obviously, they may be extended playoffs this year. But you really have to see them as 1 or 2 years away, waiting for a lot of these younger guys to develop. So why not go to a team with the guy who might break the all-time points record or all-time goals record, and is a team that really has a chance of winning a cup next year? I understand it. Obviously, you hate to see him go to a team in the Eastern Conference who the Rangers are going to have to play more than anyone else, or more than any other team. But I can't feel too bad about it. You want to see the guy go out and try and win that ultimate goal.
Yep, and I can't knock him. He's a kid who grew up in Sweden, so maybe growing up the Stanley Cup wasn't the same for American or Canadian hockey players growing up, but he wants it badly. He has a gold medal with Sweden. He could have retired, never bought a drink or a steak in New York City ever again, had 15 seasons, is statistically the best goalie in New York Rangers history. That could have been it, but he's still in pursuit of that championship, and if he no longer can do it as a New York Ranger, he was looking elsewhere, and he decides to go with the Capitals. And again, Brendan, it just not a great feeling for us, but you got to respect his choice in doing so. And the Rangers also, and I think this was an underrated move. I guess anything in hockey for me is underrated because it didn't get the news that I guess I thought it deserved. But Jesper Fast is no longer a New York Ranger. He signs with the Carolina Hurricanes for 3 years, $2 million a year. So 3 years, $6 million. And the Rangers weren't willing to give him 3 years, but they were willing to give him 2, but only on a 1-year contract. So Jesper Fast wanted more of a long-term deal, decides to go to Carolina Hurricanes. And okay, you look on paper, Jesper Fast is a third, fourth liner career, has been a long tenured Ranger, so that's maybe why some of my feelings of, just not liking the Rangers not signing him come from. But Jesper Fast, I feel, was the glue that kept this team together. I mean, every playoff series, and he's been a Ranger since 2013, so he was a part of the 2014 Eastern Conference champion winning team and the 2015 team that made the Eastern Conference final. He was that guy who was going to be a spark plug to get a good shift, to get a shot on net, to lay a hit. He was always around the puck. He's not going to show up on the stat sheet like Panarin or Zibanejad in goals. He's not, but he's going to block the shot. He's going to make the extra effort play. And the Rangers really needed a guy like that, and that's why he was on that roster. And to let him walk for little money and decide to give Jack Johnson, a defenseman from Pittsburgh this week, also a 1-year deal for $2 million, and not give it to Jesper Fast, I found that very questionable.
Yeah, and I think before we go on to this, I just want to mention that I want to go back to Lundqvist for a second and
Sure.
talk about the fact that guys playing on a 1-year contract at the end of their career isn't something that is that uncommon. I mean, take a look at Tom Brady playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's not going to be remembered as a Buccaneer. He's going to be remembered as a Patriot. And then to go a little further back, talk about Joe Montana. You don't think about him in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform. You think about him in a San Francisco 49ers uniform. So I don't think that it's that big a deal. But to move on to Jesper Fast, finally, I think that one of the things that I always found most ironic about Jesper Fast is that he doesn't play very fast. He's kind of a bruiser where he's willing to lay the body on and is not one of the quicker guys in the ice. But to put that besides the fact, I don't understand why the Rangers went and signed Jack Johnson instead of Jesper Fast. I think the New York Post had a headline that was, the Rangers win the race to sign the one player that nobody wanted this free agency. So he's a guy that doesn't really – he doesn't put a lot of points on the board, and he's kind of been struggling the last few years. So I don't understand the thought process there to go out and get him instead of Fast, except for maybe the fact that he's going to be one of the guys that's eligible in the next expansion draft. So maybe trying to bait Seattle into taking him. But if they don't, then you're stuck with a guy who's not very good on your roster.
Yeah.
So questionable call for not a lot of reward. As far as losing Foss, yes, he's been a guy that's been around for a long time. He is a spark plug, but I think that a lot of the younger guys kind of play that role as well. I mean, you look at Tony DeAngelo on the defensive side; he's a guy that's always willing to drop the gloves. And there's one other guy, I can't remember who I'm trying to remember here, but you've got other guys in that role now. So to lose him isn't that big of a deal, but to replace him with Jack Johnson, I think is the bigger question mark in this whole story.
Yeah, no. And I don't understand that signing. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is bait that Seattle has to take. And that's why the Rangers also went and signed Keith Kincaid, the goaltender, because now they can protect Shesterkin and Georgiev, and they have 3 goalies on the roster because obviously Lundqvist went to Washington. So now you're like, hey, Keith, Seattle wants you can go. If not, you'll play with the Hartford Wolfpack in the AHL. But yeah, no, I will miss Foss, and it's an amazing stat. And obviously it's years, it's a progression, it's how time works. But there's only one remaining New York Ranger from the 2014 team that reached the Stanley Cup final, that being Chris Kreider, after Jesper Fast and Henrik Lundqvist signed with other teams this week, and Mark Stahl was also bought out of his contract.
Kreider's going to be a Ranger for a long time in the future.
Yes. I hope he's a forever Ranger, but that's what I hope to Lundqvist too. But that's the way it goes, and that's the latest on hockey free agency. And you may be saying, guys, it's almost near 12:30 on an NFL Sunday. I haven't heard anything about the NFL. Well, relax. We're getting into it right now, and we're starting with, I think, the only thing to start with, and that's the fact that a game has been postponed this week between the Broncos and the Patriots. It was supposed to be 5 o'clock on Monday, which, prime real estate for viewership. I mean, who's not ready to watch football at 5 o'clock on a Monday? But that is when, because of some of what happened with COVID last week, the Patriots were slated to play against Denver, and that game has been pushed back to next Sunday. So this week will serve as a bye, and they will join the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions on a bye week, theoretically. But my question to you guys, is this a concern? Because we touched on it last week in terms of the NFL handling COVID pretty well early on, but now 2 weeks in a row getting struck by this. Is this a concern? And I don't think they could continue going forward with 1 or 2 games getting postponed each week.
Especially with football, with everyone's schedule. These guys are such creatures of habit to get your body ready to be basically hit by a truck once a week. And now we're pushing it back. You got to re-prepare to do it. It's not good for the players. It's not good for the networks. It's not good for the fans. It's not good for my fantasy team. It's not good for anyone. So I don't know, what they're going to do to counteract this. I'm sure they saw this coming with the NFL. I just don't know really what their plan is, unless their plan was to postpone games. You're going to need a really giant bubble. The NBA has played 170 straight games with no delays, with no problems, because that's what they had. As soon as they got everybody in, obviously they had some protocols in place to avoid having the virus get in. The NFL is going to have to isolate people if they want to do this without having to postpone and have people exposed. 'Cause otherwise, this is just going to continue to happen. And I don't know if they can continue the season, to be honest. It would not surprise me if they can't.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think that the NFL really foresaw anything like this happening. I mean, when they came out with their schedule a few months ago, they didn't have any contingency plan as far as what would happen if games had to get postponed. So they're really flying by the seat of their pants as far as what teams get it, when they get it, and when these games are going to be rescheduled to. I know there was a lot of talk earlier when the Titans started getting cases of COVID that they might make the Tennessee Titans forfeit a game. But then, the question marks are thrown up about competitive balance. The Bills would then have 2 bye weeks, and they'd be able to come off 1 bye week into another and have to play the Ravens afterwards. But at the same time, when you're well rested like that, Dan, you mentioned guys having to throw their bodies against one another for one time a game, but repetitively, it's just a big question mark. It really is. No one really knows what's going to happen. And with a postponement today, obviously, we don't know what the NFL's thought process is or when these games are going to have to be made up. We saw in the MLB that they went by win percentage, but obviously playing 60 games or a little less than 60 games, as we saw the Cardinals do before they ended up making the playoffs, is a lot different than playing 16, where each game matters a lot more.
Yeah, and it's definitely a cause for concern. And Dan, you mentioned a good point in terms of these players that having to get ready for a week of preparing their bodies. And Melvin Gordon, I think, tweeted Denver Bronco running back Melvin Gordon that, like, how could this happen this close to kickoff? That they're just pulling the rug out from under us. And he obviously showed his disdain for wanting to play and the fact that he can't in this week. But obviously, there was COVID precautions with it, and it's not happening. And it will be interesting to see, because right now Tennessee versus Buffalo is slated for Tuesday, and that game's still up in the air because the epicenter for COVID in the NFL has really been from the Tennessee Titans, and they got in trouble this week for having a unregulated workout, which a couple of the players went on a field away from the facility because obviously the facility was closed, and got some reps in. So not great in terms of that. But right now, as we currently stand, only one game has been postponed, and it will be now just one game on Monday Night Football between the Chargers and Saints, and then Bills-Titans still slated for Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the NFL wants to make everyone really upset, they should do that thing that college football does where they have the board of people decide who makes the playoffs. It's really insane. They might not all play the same amount of games. If they had a board, I would watch. I'd be like, I wonder if they're going to pick the Bills because, things are so crazy and not everyone plays the same amount of games, which could happen. Right now, they're still planning to. I mean, that would get me to watch. I think we should pitch that to the NFL.
And make a lot more people upset, too.
Yeah, I'd love to say.
Oh, yeah.
That system, even though I think it's the best system college football could possibly have, people hate it. I wish it was around when Boise State was good and, UCF, so they would have gotten in back when it was only the two teams. But that's a side note. But that's an interesting thing to bring up because, again, right now each team is scheduled to play 16 games, but you never know where this might take us. You take it day by day, and that's what the NFL is doing. Some local updates in terms of the local NFL games because some news is coming across and just want to update you on that in terms of the Giants and the Jets. For the Giants, O'Shane Exemes is out. Jabril Peppers is questionable. We'll see if he plays. He was out last week against the Rams, and we'll see if he plays this week against the Cowboys. They're going to need him in the secondary to slow down CeeDee Lamb and the bevy of weapons that the Dallas Cowboys have. But right now, still questionable, and obviously that kickoff is at 4:25. And in terms of the Jets' 1 o'clock game, Sam Darnold is out. That was confirmed earlier this week, and may not play next week either, but is out for today's game against the Cardinals. And he was doubtful coming into the game, but has now been ruled out, and that is Mekhi Becton, the offensive lineman for the New York Jets. Notable questionables for them are Chris Hogan and Brashad Perriman, both wide receivers that Joe Flacco, who will be the Jets starter, is going to need.
Joe Flacco.
Yes, Joe Flacco. Good old Joe Flacco. But I think it's a perfect segue into talking about the Giants and the Jets. And again, if people who've watched the show, we give our NFL picks 12:50 going up right till kickoff, and we'll give a pick on every game as well as our lock, upset, and game of the week picks. But I just, want to touch on both New York teams, and I buried it as long as I could. I felt we shouldn't touch on. There's better things to touch on. The Yankees, the NBA Finals, and as well as the recent New York Rangers free agency moves. But the New York Giants, man, last week that was a winnable game. It was a winnable game. They lost 17-9 to the Los Angeles Rams, and arguably you can make the case the Giants have lost 2 one-possession games that they could have won, and they could be 2-2 and tops in this division and still be a bad team. And that's what's frustrating about this whole thing. Last week, Daniel Jones didn't have Saquon Barkley, didn't have Sterling Shepard, won't have him today against the Dallas Cowboys either, against Saquon out for the whole year. But he did what he could with what was around him. Found Evan Ingram a couple times, hit Darius Slayton for a big 33-yard gain, was the leading rusher again for the New York Giants. He made great plays, kept them in it, got a couple field goals, but couldn't finish it out. The final drive, you started with a 33-yard pass to Slayton. Daniel Jones gets 2 10-yard runs to convert first downs. It's 2nd and 5 at the 14-yard line. And Daniel Jones has a first down. He could have gotten 5 more yards, slid, and he had the running ability. Tries to force a ball to Damian Ratley. Who is that? I don't know. They picked him up from Cleveland. And when training camp ended, he wasn't in camp with them. Tries to force a ball into Damian Ratley. Is intercepted. And the Giants lose 17-9. Oh my goodness. Like, they're pitiful. They haven't scored a touchdown in 2 games. The Rams game was still winnable because the defense has played very well, and it was a 17-9 loss, but they haven't scored a touchdown 8 quarters. This is a 2020 offense. This is a league in which the offense is supposed to be, offenses are better than defense. The rules that they keep changing are better for offenses. It's an offensive league. And I guess you could say that about the NFL always, but especially now. And they haven't scored a touchdown in 8 quarters. It's concerning. And I'm not saying this defense is the 85 Bears by any means, but in terms of yards allowed per game in the first 4 games, the Giants rank 5th best in the NFL. 5th. They've only allowed, I think it was like 313 yards per game. Don't quote me on that number, but if you look at the stats, the 5th least amount of yards to the opponent. And they lost? And they're 0-4? They don't have a win? I mean, there's 4 0-4 teams. The Jets, who we'll touch on shortly, the Texans and the Falcons. And the Giants are the best defense out of all 4 of those. I mean, and they're 0-4. And I can't, again, Jones is a second-year quarterback. And it's a tough proposition. He doesn't have enough weapons, but, it's frustrating. It really is.
Yeah, and the old adage is defense wins championships.
Yeah.
But clearly the Giants are absolutely destroying that adage because they have literally a top 10 defense in the NFL and yet cannot seem to win a game. 0-4, as you mentioned. The offense hasn't scored in 2 games. It's kind of sad, to be completely honest, where you look at a defense that has played very, very well. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, the fact that they're 5th in the league in yards per game, and still the offense cannot do anything. You're supposed to build off the momentum that your defense gives you on the offensive side of the ball. We know that they've lost weapons. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, one of the premier running backs in the NFL, out for the season and has not been able to help them in these last few weeks. But at the same time, you have to get something going because your defense is going out there and putting up stops. When you have a bad offense, that means your defense is out in the field a lot more often than they normally would be. And yet they're still 5th in the league in yards per game allowed. And that just goes on to prove that their defense, while they're 5th in the league in yards per game, has been performing at a level higher because they're out on the field a lot more often than they probably should be because the offense can't get anything going on their side of the ball. So to watch the Giants just continue to lose games, it's painful, to be honest, because the defense proves that they should be a better team, and yet they just can't put the points on the board to win.
Here's the thing. Growing up as a Bills fan, I consider myself kind of an expert on just teams that are struggling in the NFL. And I think the Giants are going to get out of this far quicker than, for example, Buffalo would have, because they have reached a level of badness that the Bills never did. So, like, Buffalo would always be awful, but they'd always win, 7 games. So they wouldn't get a top draft pick and they wouldn't make the playoffs. They would just be irrelevant. And that happened for, years. That set them behind for so long. If the Giants don't win any games this year, that would be so good for them because now they're going to get a great draft pick and they're going to get better really quicker. That's why, I think you either have to just absolutely hit the bottom or you have to be competitive. Because if you're in the middle, that's just somehow so much worse.
That not what I want to hear in week 5, Dan. I'll be honest. Just being honest. But yeah, and the Giants face the Dallas Cowboys 4:25. It's on CBS, by the way, not Fox. The game of the week in terms of what the national window will be. It's on CBS, but which is always surprising. I care about this stuff, but yeah. And the Giants are, I think, the last time I checked, 8-point underdogs. Might have flexed itself to 7, but they're facing a Dallas Cowboy defense that allowed 300 rushing yards last week to the Cleveland Browns, and the Giants are underdogs by more than a touchdown. not a great state of affairs. And, I think people who are watching might be Jets fans are like, I don't care for your pity, John, because the Jets are probably worse. The Jets play the Cardinals this week, 1 p.m., and they're not even starting Sam Darnold. So you can't even, if they lose this game, you can't even say, oh, at least we got to see another look at Darnold. If he's the quarterback of the future, this and that. He's hurt. I told you they're going to be without offensive lineman and first-round pick Mekhi Becton. And their receiving core, if Hogan and Perriman don't play, is going to take a hit. I don't know how there's a way that Jets don't go to 0-5. I don't think the Cardinals, I think the Cardinals in week 1 where they beat a San Francisco 49ers team that was fully healthy at the time might have been a fluke. Like, I think they've adjusted themselves well of what they're going to be this season. But they're a good team. It's going to be very tough for the Jets to muster out a win today. And, again, they play 1 p.m. on Fox. And I know, Brennan, once we get to our NFL picks, which, again, are coming up shortly, we'll break down this game for us. But not to spoil anything, but I don't know how the Jets come out on top.
I think this season might be a historical one in the fact that the Jets may go 0-16. They may be the third team in NFL history to go winless throughout the entire season, go 100% defeated instead of, undefeated.
Sure.
Because at this point, they're just so bad. And, John, you mentioned it earlier. Sam Darnold not going to play. So he's their starting quarterback. When you lose your starting quarterback, regardless of who the backup is, whether or not it's elite Joe Flacco, your team gets worse. So I don't understand anyone who says that the Jets might win today. I get that it's very difficult for a team to go 0-16, but we've seen more teams go 0-16 than we have seen teams go 16-0. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I don't think without Sam Darnold, I don't think they are going to have any kind of chance against a Kyler Murray-led Cardinals team that knows how to put points on the board.
I mean, Joe Flacco's going to have to eat his Wheaties today to get the Jets to win. They're playing the Cardinals. I just don't see it. If Sam Darnold were playing, maybe I would joke about it. But since he's not, the Jets are going to win.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm sure what Jets fans want to hear in week 5 too, Brennan, that their team could go 0-16. But realistically too, you look at their schedule, the next game where maybe it's a toss-up or the Jets have a good shot is week 10 versus the Dolphins. You look at their schedule going forward, I don't have it in front of me, but it's bad. They're games that they're not going to be single-digit underdogs. And today, the spread is, I'm looking for it right now, 7.5 to Arizona, according to Caesar Sportsbook. But it's a rough schedule ahead. They're going to have to play above and beyond to muster out a win. And maybe in the double digits, they catch a team sleeping. But not where New York football wants to be. And as pitiful as it's been, and last year was pretty bad too when they matched up, and I believe the Giants were 1-7 and the Jets were 2-8 or whatever. But it might be even worse as we go further and further into this NFL season. But all right, before we put our NFL picks and you people at home make some money by putting putting our picks down and maybe making fun of me because I've struggled, we're gonna give our MVP of the week. It's a segment we do in which we look at someone who's probably maybe underappreciated and make them our MVP of the week. Someone who had a great week, someone who did something during the week, which was awesome. And Dan, we could start with you.
So I wanted to make it Danny Green because we already talked about him. How he's a better shooter than one shot. Mm-hmm. But there's actually someone in the Lakers who, believe it or not, is playing worse this series. That is Kyle Kuzma. Kuzma is my MVP of the week because I learned on Twitter before this show started that a bunch of Laker fans started one of those petitions you can sign, and it has thousands of signatures that says if the Lakers win, Kyle Kuzma doesn't get a ring. I was amazed by this because these people still think that Kyle Kuzma is just not good. Is he having a rough series? To be honest with you, I don't even know. It doesn't matter. They're up 3-2. Kyle Kuzma is not the reason that the Heat have won 2 games, but people still want to trash him and destroy him. So, Kyle Kuzma, if the Lakers win, I think you should get a ring, and you're my MVP this week.
Wow. I'm sure he'll appreciate it because he's not getting a lot of love anywhere else.
No.
Can you imagine, though, if a team were to just be like, everyone else on the roster, even the equipment guys are getting rings. Kyle Kuzma, no thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was almost me in 8th grade during ring day. They were like, wait, You're gonna graduate? I don't think. No, but yeah, they wound up giving me a ring. I'll go next because I feel like Brennan might have a good MVP of the week, and I think I've come flat with mine. But last night I was watching SNL, and Bill Burr was hilarious. And in this climate, he said some things that I wouldn't say. They're very offensive, and I appreciate that he can go on national TV and say it in a place where maybe it's not going to be as great received as maybe his stand-up tour. You know, he goes to Boston, Massachusetts at the TD Garden. He's going to get a great reception no matter what he says. Comes to New York, you know, I don't know. His stand-up's available on SNL's Twitter. Go watch it. You know, I think it was very funny, and it attacked everybody, which is always a great thing.
Go watch that, and go watch Jack White from last night. His 4th appearance on SNL. He was fantastic. You know, watch that too.
The thought went in my head because I always just go on my phone during the musical numbers. I'm sure you appreciate that. But I was like, I wonder if Dan likes this guy because I've never heard of him before tonight. And I believe oh really? Wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
He's the man. His greatest hits come out in December.
Wow.
He had coming in and filling in on short notice because originally the guest this week was supposed to be Morgan Wallen.
Yeah,
yes,
didn't he say something? Oh,
huh? Yeah, violated COVID protocol, so they kicked him off the show.
Oh, jeez. So every girl who pretends she's country and is gonna be very disappointed. That's everyone who thinks they're country's favorite country artist, but the people who are actually country, it's not. Brendan, does that attack you?
I agree with that actually. Now that I'm thinking about it.
I'm not trying to be offensive out here, but yeah.
Listen, I live out in the middle of nowhere, so people around here don't pretend. They actually are country. Yeah. So I don't think I've ever heard anyone say their favorite artist is Morgan Wallen. That's a good point.
I have, but I live in Queens, so that shows.
Right, so yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Absolutely makes sense. All right, I'll go next. My MVP of the week, and this goes because I am a Texas Tech football fan for no reason other than I like playing with them in NCAA 14 because they ran the air raid offense. And because of that, my MVP of the week is Mike Leach for bringing the air raid offense to the SEC with Mississippi State. Now, let's forget about the fact that Mississippi State scored 2 points yesterday. 2 points. They scored a safety, and that's it. So they scored 2 points yesterday, and I forget their quarterback's name, but he's had 4 interceptions, which obviously is going to be very detrimental to any kind of offense. But I want to take a look at the SEC and how many points they've scored. So it's week 6 of the college football season. It's the 3rd week of conference play for the SEC because they started in conference play and this is their 3rd week of playing. Week 6 of 2020, SEC teams averaged 33.7 points per game. Taking a look at this week, how many points they scored, if you get rid of Mississippi State only scoring 2 points, they average 36.2. So add another 3 points on top of that. In the 3rd week of conference play last year, the SEC averaged 26.9 points per game, which is almost a full 10 points less than if you don't include Mississippi State. I love the air raid offense. I love teams scoring points, and Mike Leach, the creator of the air raid offense, one of the funniest coaches, one of the most charismatic coaches in college football, brings it to the SEC. Former Texas Tech head coach, obviously he was let go because of a little, we don't talk about why he was let go, but it's fine. Just don't look it up. Okay. Former Texas Tech, former Washington State head coach, quarterbacked Gardner Minshew to the NFL. Gardner Minshew, a character in himself, probably learned that from Leach, wearing the fake mustache on one of Washington State's premier games. But I love Mike Leach. I love that his teams just put up points no matter what, and I don't think we're going to see another 2-point performance out of Mississippi State the rest of this season if their quarterback can throw less than 4 interceptions in a game.
Very nice. Mike Leach, definitely a unique character. And those are our MVPs of the week. Take them for what they are. And that is just something we thought was cool from this week. And it went in different places. And that's the fun of this segment. But now it's 12:50. Focus in. Fixated on the NFL. It kicks off in 10 minutes. And we're going to give you our game picks. And before we do, just an update on the standings. And it doesn't look good for me. I am 36-23 overall. I'm in last place with 43 points. Dan is 41-18 overall, 49 points. And Brennan is the leader of the pack, 45-14 with 55 points. And our point system goes as follows. Our locks, upsets, and game of the week picks are worth 2, and the rest of the games are worth 1. We provide the spread because we want to provide all the context that we can, but we don't bet the spread. We bet the winners or losers of the game. And we'll kick off NFL Week 5 with Rams versus Washington. And actually, you know what? No, we'll audible. We'll go our locks, upsets, game of the week. If you listen to the podcast, you know, but I think those are the ones that people tune in for. So we'll start actually with our game of the week pick. And the game of the week, I slated it because it might not happen, and I think there's just the most interesting storylines around it, and that's Bills versus Titans. I have the spread at 8 with the Bills currently. I think the number has changed and gone down, but they're heavy favorites from the last time I checked. We all have the Bills across the board. My reasoning is that the Bills are just a better team, and Tennessee, if both teams were fully healthy, Tennessee's not fully healthy. They've been not worried about their game plan for Buffalo this week. They've been worried about trying to keep a virus under control. So I have the Bills in that game and to remain undefeated.
Yeah, Dan, I'll let you go last because I know that you're going to have some hot takes. Yep. So I don't think that the Tennessee Titans are ready for a football game in general. I mean, you look at their roster, they've lost how many guys to COVID at this point, and the Buffalo Bills are pretty much at full strength, save for normal injuries and players that get banged up during a week. So I don't see the Buffalo Bills losing this game at all against a weak Titans team who at this point, regardless, are the worst undefeated team in the NFL.
So if the Titans were fully healthy, and this would be a close game, but they're not. So I think the Bills are obviously going to win this game. My bigger concern is that the Bills are playing the Titans on a Tuesday night. And then next week on extremely short rest, the Bills get the Chiefs. So that's going to be a problem for Buffalo. They only have a few days to recover, to game plan. But I think that they will beat the Titans if they play on Tuesday.
And there's been people who wanted maybe the Titans to forfeit, but the game currently, as you know, currently scheduled, will happen on Tuesday night. That's our game of the week picks. I'm 4-0 in the game of the week picks, along with Brennan and Dan. You're 3-1. So success when we pick our game of the week. Now we'll go into our upset picks, and this week was especially tough. Anyone who's looked at the spreads in this slate of games, where are these upsets coming from? So we had to be a bit creative. And I looked at the Monday Night Football game, and it might come as a shock. It's a tough upset pick, but that's what I'm trying to earn it this week. 2-2 on the season. I haven't found the correct formula yet, so maybe outside the box. But I'm going with the Chargers defeating the Saints on Monday Night Football. Look, the Saints I know are favored by 7.5. You always look at quarterback versus quarterback in a matchup where you feel the teams are even. And Drew Brees versus Justin Herbert shouldn't be a matchup, really. It should be a very one-sided. But the appearances that Drew Brees has had on primetime television, which this year, has been 2. He's underperformed. Brennan knows this firsthand as a Packers fan. He underperformed against them, and I don't think that's going to be the reason they lose, but I don't think he's going to be Drew Brees of yesteryear. I think Justin Herbert and this Chargers offense is hot at the right time. There's not much known about Herbert. He's still, a couple games into his career, and I have the Chargers knocking off the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, I just a quick comment on that game because I don't think I'm going to have an opportunity to say it later, but I think that Justin Herbert obviously named the starter going forward for the Chargers for the rest of the season this week, so that's got to be a confidence boost. And I think the Air Bear and that Chargers team are pretty much built to beat a team like the Saints, so I actually agree with you on that one, that the Chargers are going to win. I did not pick it as my upset of the week, though. I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings as a 7-point dog against the Seattle Seahawks. Honestly, it's due to the fact that I don't think any team is going to go 16-0 this year. The Seahawks have not lost a game, and I think that this is kind of a trap game for them. I think that the Vikings, while they're not very good, obviously we've seen how the loss of Stephon Diggs has impacted their offense this season. I think that they're going to come out and have a good game in a game where maybe Seattle is trying to recover from a tough game last week. And I think that it's just kind of a trap game for the Seahawks in the fact that the Vikings are maybe a little bit better than they've played this year. So I got the Vikings as my underdog.
So the Chargers over the Saints and the Vikings over the Seahawks are both much smarter upsets than what I'm about to say right now. But I feel like mine is just a lot more fun. I got the Giants over the Cowboys because I want to see Stephen A. Smith's alter ego Southern Steve come back and live happily and see him yell more on ESPN in general. So I'm going to take the Giants this week. Do I know why? Not really, but I'm going to take them.
Yeah, as a Giant fan, that's a dumb pick, Dan, but it's okay. In terms of upsets, Brennan and I are 2-2, and Dan is 1-3 on the season. And now our locks, where I've struggled, I'm 1-3. Brennan is 4-0, as well as Dan. I'll start with my lock. And if you remember or recall last week, I locked the Houston Texans against the Minnesota Vikings. Bit me on the butt. Minnesota won. Guess what? I'm locking the Houston Texans again. They're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're favored by 5.5. I think Houston has enough to beat Jacksonville. They're 0-4, and they have the best offense out of anyone who's 0-4. They shouldn't be this bad. Bill O'Brien's out the door. Romeo Crennel's taken over. And I think Houston and Deshaun Watson, he's too good. The offense is too good with Will Fuller, Watson, to be 0-5. So I think they get the job done today.
Yeah, when you take a look at the games that are really eligible for us to lock, we kind of handcuffed ourselves and said that it couldn't be any bigger than a 7-point spread. So that gives us 5 games to pick from.
Yeah.
I picked one of them as my upset with the Vikings over the Seahawks. So it only gave me 4. And I agree. I think at -5.5, I think the Texans should be able to win this game. Obviously, we saw the Jaguars come out and beat the Colts, who are a presumptive AFC contender in week 1, but I don't think that they're actually that good. And I think that the Texans are being a little bit undervalued as far as they were another team that we came out and looked at in the AFC and said they might have a chance if they can win a few games. They're the best 0-4 team in the league, and I think that they should be able to win this one pretty handily against the Jags.
So as I hear you guys talking about it, I think I'm going to change my pick and take the Texans, but I don't want to lock it. Right now I have the Seahawks just because all the other spreads are so big. I don't want to lock the Browns or the Colts. That's a pick 'em.
Yeah.
Steelers and Eagles is just dangerous. I wouldn't touch that one either. So right now I have the Seahawks, but I don't feel great about it. So it's kind of a strategic lock this week for me.
Very nice. And those are game of the week locks and upsets. And now we'll just run through the rest of NFL Week 5. And Dan, we start with the Rams versus the Washington football team.
We're all taking the Rams because the Washington football team has a ridiculous name and no one thinks they're going to win, and I hope they lose because they have a terrible name. And the Rams are also pretty good.
Hey, Chase Young is active, though, for Washington.
A good note on that game. Next up is the Battle of Pennsylvania, Eagles-Steelers. Steelers are favored by 7. We all have the Steelers in this one, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. This matchup always shows that it's a close game and they both play each other well. I wouldn't call it a rivalry necessarily, like maybe the Giants and Jets where it's across both conferences, but it's definitely going to be a good matchup, but we have the Steelers across the board. And then going to the next game, it's Panthers versus Falcons. This is an interesting one because the Falcons are favored by 1, but Brennan and Dan both have the Carolina Panthers and Teddy Bridgewater to knock off the Falcons. To me, the Falcons are just going to put up too much points. I know. All they've done this season is blow leads, and it becomes a meme. If you blow a lead, you're the new Atlanta Falcons. If somebody comes back on you, you're the Atlanta Falcons. I understand this. Falcons are also no-win team. They got to get it done today versus Carolina. They just have to, and I think they will. And I have them in that game.
Our next game, Cardinals versus Jets. I don't think anyone is going to pick with the Jets at all this year. I mentioned that I could see them going 0-16, and that holds true here. All 3 of us with the Cardinals and a -7.5-point spread. I just think the offense is going to be too good for the Jets defense, and they really don't have any weapons as far as putting points on the board either. So Cardinals in this one.
Next game we got is Chiefs, Raiders. All 3 of us got the Chiefs. I mean, I don't think Spider 2-Eye Banana will be good enough to beat Patrick Mahomes this week. I really think the Chiefs are going to get it done just because they're a really, really good football team.
What's next? Ravens-Bengals is next. All 3 of us are taking the Ravens in this one. They're 13-point favorites. I think that's a little wide for a Bengals team that has improved since last year. Obviously, they were number 1 pick, took Joe Burrow, and now they have 2 wins on the season. So they're a good team. Not a good team. They're an average team at 2-2, but I don't think that they stack up to the Ravens at all, and neither do either of the other 2 on the show. So Ravens for all 3.
Next is Jaguars, Texans. We already kind of talked about this. Originally, I had the Jaguars, but I was thinking about it. I think it's time the Texans win as well.
Wow.
I like to say Gardner Minshew's name, but I don't think he's going to win this Sunday. So we all got the Texans.
Next up, Dolphins versus 49ers. 49ers favored by 9 points, and all three of us are going to take the Niners in that one. It's only a matter of time before Tua comes in for the Dolphins. I don't think it's going to be this game, and because I don't think it's this game, I don't think they win.
Giants versus Cowboys next. You heard my thoughts earlier on in the program, so won't go too in depth. All I got to say is Danny Dimes has to play like a full quarter instead of a dime in this one for them to win. Next up, Colts and Browns.
Colts and Browns are a pick 'em. I just asked the Magic 8 Ball, will the Colts win this game? And they said absolutely. So I have the Browns, but the Magic 8 Ball said that that's wrong. It's a pick 'em, kids. Flip a coin. You guys got the Colts. I got the Browns.
Next up, Vikings Seahawks. Seahawks favored by a touchdown. Dan's got it as his lock of the week. I have it as my upset, and John's going with the Seahawks as well. I'm the only one picking the Vikings in this one. I don't know. Just don't think the Seahawks are going to be able to come out and win this game. Mentioned it earlier. Next up is Chargers Saints on Monday night.
Yep, Monday Night Football. Again, I brought my reasoning why I want the Chargers, or why I'm picking the Chargers, I should say, to win. Brennan agrees. Dan does not. And the final game is Bills versus Titans, and we talked about that as well. And we have Bills across the board. So that does it for the MVP show. It's now 1 o'clock, so go find a TV and watch some NFL football. Thanks, Dan and Brennan, hopping on. It was, I think, another good episode. And if you want to rewatch it, you can go back on our YouTube page, as well as our podcast, which is available on platforms such as Anchor and Spotify, and is a 30-minute compressed version and a little different thoughts in a different format. But I think it's just all us three, so it's great content nonetheless. But that does it for our episode. Thank you for tuning in to the MVP show.